Here's the truth about B2B sales conversations. If you end your calls without a meeting booked in the calendar and it's like, oh, we'll get back to you, you're in the bottom 20%. If you end your sales conversations with a meeting booked in the calendar, you're in the top 20%. If you start your conversations with what's expected from the prospect, what they're going to get out of the conversation, what yes or no looks like, and get their confirmation, as well as ending it with a meeting booked in the diary or a no, then congratulations, you're in the top 1%. If you're wondering who I am, I'm Joe Milnes. I've been in B2B sales over 25 years and I've coached over 300 founders to generate over £185 million in revenue. Very quickly, if you want to work with me and find out what is wrong or where the opportunities are in your own sales process, or you've got leads that aren't closing, then you can work with me for £1. We'll tell you everything that's wrong and exactly how to fix it, and it's only going to cost you £1. The link is in the description. Book a call and I'll speak to you then. So what are we going to cover in this video? By the end of this video, you will know what the bookends are and when to use them. I'll give you the complete framework to eliminate ghosting and increase your deal velocity. I'll explain about the upfront contract and exactly how to set expectations at the front of every sales call. I'll explain the BAMFAM strategy and how to consistently book next steps at the end of each call. And I'll show you how to conquer edge cases and common objections that come up in this sales environment. Deals die in the gaps between sales conversations, and time kills deals. So by not having next steps booked in the calendar, it harms your deal's conversion and it also kills your deal velocity. Enterprise sales cycles are taking longer than ever at the moment. So anything that you can do to pull those deals in means you're giving yourself more time within the month to hit target. Now, after working with hundreds of sales teams, the biggest lever that most sales teams can pull to increase the revenue that they generate and the speed at which they generate is putting the Bookends framework in place. And what that means is that at the beginning of every sales interaction, you make it clear from the prospect what's expected from them, what's going to happen at the end of the call, what you're going to give them at the end of it, and what yes or no looks like. And you're going to get their confirmation. This sets the frame for the rest of the conversation so that the prospect is fine with a no or a yes. You're just trying to get the prospect as quickly as possible to a yes or a no. No's are absolutely fine. It's the maybes that kill deals and your resource. And then the other part of the framework is the end of the call, which is making sure if there's a next step, there's a next step and it's booked in the diary. If there is no next step, there is no next step. You can't just send a proposal or send a prospect into the ether and expect that they're going to come back as many times as they will. So the Bookends is a two-part framework and it's for every single customer conversation. It means at the start of every call, you make it clear what's expected from the prospect, what they're going to get as part of that conversation, what you'll need to do to get there, and what yes or no looks like for the customer. And you're going to get their confirmation that that's okay before you start the interaction. And then at the end of the call, you're going to make sure that you address whether it's a yes or a no. And then if there's a next step, that's booked in the diary there. If there's no next step, there is no next step. A proposal is not a boomerang. If you throw it to the customer, it's not necessarily going to come back. So it's making sure that in every single sales interaction, if you have a next step that makes sense with the customer, that should be booked in the diary so you're not letting prospects wander off and losing control of the sales process. And I've lost count of how many founders have come to me and told me that this is the problem and a recurring issue that they're facing. They'll have a great conversation. Everyone loves it. They're like, oh, this is so good. They say, yeah, I'm just going to get approval or we're just going to sign off on the board and then we'll come back to you, but you should be good. And then you don't hear anything back. And then you follow up, nothing happens. Then you follow up again and then no response. Then they block your number and then the deal dies. And you're none the wiser. And often it's not that the prospect has changed their mind, it's that you've let time get in the way and then priorities shift. They forget about the value. They forget how to articulate the benefits to their CEO or the stakeholders. And the time just dilutes the sales offering, so you're losing deals. You should use the Bookends framework in every single customer conversation. You're leading the sale. You're leading your prospect through each stage. So from the first contact, discovery calls, demos, proposal reviews, you should control the process with the customer at every single stage. If you're speaking to a prospect, use these bookends. So there's two components, as I mentioned. We're going to cover them now. There's the upfront contract, which is a Sandler concept at the start of the conversation. And then there's a BAMFAM, which is book a meeting from the meeting at the end of the conversation. Every conversation equals clarity at the start and commitment at the end. So the upfront contract has 5 components, which we're going to cover now. It's stating the purpose, explaining what happens, state what you need from the customer, define the end state, and get agreement from them. And we're going to roll in through those in a little bit more detail now, so you get an idea of exactly what those sound like in your own calls. So the first component is stating the purpose. This is just very clearly being direct on why you're on the call. It sounds silly, but most people focus on small talk or icebreakers or trying to build rapport because they think that's going to help the prospect. If they're coming on an early stage sales conversation, has got quite a low amount of trust and credibility in you in most instances. So you want to put them at ease as quickly as possible by taking control and saying, look, this is why we're here. So for me, it's like, thanks for joining the call. I want to get us to the point as quickly as possible where we can decide between us if it makes sense to further the conversation and if we can help you with your specific problems. I don't want to say, oh, we're going to have a chat or it's really good to find out. I want to state a firm purpose for the call. People are busy. They don't want to waste time. So you're being respectful by showing you this is what we're trying to get to at the end of the call. Next, you're going to explain very concisely what's going to happen. In order to get us to this objective, this is what needs to happen. And so I would say, in order for us to get us to the point where we know whether we can help, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about your sales and marketing process, who's doing what, and where you feel the potential bottlenecks are going to be. Next, you want to say what is expected of the customer. I'm going to need you to be honest. I'm going to ask some questions that might be a little bit uncomfortable. It's absolutely fine if it's a no or it's not a priority. If you think at any point it's not a good fit, then please let me know and I will do the same with you. So you want to state what's required from the customer and what they're going to get at the end of it. And then you want to make it very clear what yes or no looks like. At the end of this call, I want to get us to the point where yes, we've both decided that it makes sense. And then what happens if we haven't said no to each other? The next step is going to be X, Y, Z. So you're saying, look, this is what's going to happen. I want to get us to this point, and this is what you're going to get at that end point. In order for us to do that, I need to ask you a bunch of questions about your existing sales and marketing process. What I need for you to be able to do is to be honest. If you don't think it's a good fit, just let me know. I will do the same. And then at the end of the call, if it looks like it's a good fit and we haven't said no to each other, then the next step will be X, Y, Z. And then the last icing on the cake is really, really important. Is that okay? And it sounds like such a simple thing, but asking someone if it's okay and getting a yes means that it plays into the consistency principle. So by getting their agreement at the front of the call, it paves the way for them to answer the questions and engage in the conversation and in the process throughout the rest of that call. So really important, get the agreement and then say, yes, does that sound okay? Perfect. So as an example, it's thanks for jumping on the call. I want us to get to the point as quickly as possible where we both understand if we can help you or not with your problems. In order to do that, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about your current situation and your current sales and marketing process. I want you to be completely honest about your priorities. And similarly, if you think it's not a good fit, just let me know. And if the end of the call, what normally happens if we haven't said no to each other, the next step is going to be a demo where we would invite other stakeholders on so they can see the platform in action. Does that sound okay? Yes, perfect. Let's dive in. And the no path is really powerful. Salespeople are scared of no, but no is absolutely fine. A superstar closer close around about 35 to 40% in some very rare instances, which means 60% of the people that you are going to be speaking to are going to say no, even if they're qualified, just because of other things. So part of being a good salesperson is focusing on the ones that can close and not qualifying the ones that aren't going to close. The no's absolutely fine. What is killing people is the resource, time, effort, and emotional energy that people spend on maybes that are no's dressed up as maybes. And so we want to flush out no and get rid of prospects that aren't treating it as a priority, aren't interested in the problems that we solve as soon as possible. Also worth noting on that is if as a salesperson you show you aren't scared of no and you are detached from the outcome, it automatically makes the prospect trust you more. If you say, I'm really not interested in selling anything to you if it's not a good fit, you'll visibly see prospects relax because they know that they're not going to be subjected to some blithering sales nonsense as someone's tried to like suck up and like sell their product to them. So showing you detached from the outcome is really powerful and it puts people at ease. You'll have much better conversation. The next part of the bookend, the second part of the bookend is at the end of the conversation, and that is BAMFAM. And there's 4 steps to this. It's summarizing what's happened over the call, flushing any objections or concerns, calling back the contract, and then booking the next step in the calendar, not in the future, not I'll get back to you, it's in the calendar. So I'm going to walk you through how to do that now. After the discovery call or whatever call it is or the demo, you want to summarize the key points. So based on what you've told me, you've got issues with your sales and marketing, you're closing at 10%, whereas you feel that you can close network or referrals at 60%. So you summarize the key points. So it's based on what you've told me. You're dealing with X, Y, and Z. It's costing you this, and you need to get it addressed by X, Y, and Z. Ideally, the perfect solution for you would cover X, Y, and Z. Is that right? Okay. So is there anything that you've seen today that makes you think that it wouldn't work for the solution? So if you've presented, then you want to flush out any objections and find out where a temperature check. So is there anything that you've seen today that you think wouldn't be a good fit for your circumstance? No. Okay. And is there anything that you haven't seen today which you think you would desperately need in order to reach your goals? And why you ask those 2 questions effectively, am I doing too much, or do you believe that we can help you? And is there anything that is missing from the solution? If they say no, then you can move on. You've got their permission to move on. Okay, well, given what we said at the start of the call, we said that it'd be a next step. So this is what the next step will be. And then the beauty of it, because they've agreed at the beginning of the call, when you call that back, so at the start, we agreed that if this made sense, we'd book the next step. So based on what we've covered, would you have any objection in getting that scheduled in? And then just shut up. And then the next step is booking the next step, just making sure it's in the diary. Everyone has their calendars on the phone. Like everyone has their calendars. There's no excuse to not getting something in the diary. Everyone's got their calendar on the computer. So great, when would be appropriate is because it lets them feel in control. And if it's a demo or you're looking for other stakeholders, you can say, who else would normally be involved or would like to be involved in that? Get them involved in that and then just get it booked in. Easy. So a full example, look, based on what you shared, I'm confident we can solve these problems. If we could help you get to your goal without the thing that you don't like, would it be worth exploring further? Okay, yes. When would be appropriate for the next step? Who else should be involved? And I've got Thursday at 2 or Friday at 3. Which one works for you? And then send the invite while they're on the call. Make sure it's locked in. Now, a couple of edge cases where you'll get prospects might try and wriggle out and how to deal with them. I need to talk to my CFO before booking. You say, okay, when do you think you'll meet them? And they'll say, I'll probably meet them this week. Okay, so you say generally what happens after those meetings is they're probably going to have some questions about effort, times and risk profiles. Does that sound about right? Yeah. Okay, with that in mind then, shall we book, have you got any objections if we book a session after that to cover any questions, objections or concerns, and we can run through that and agree the next steps? Obviously, if it's a hard no, you can let me know in the meantime. And that's the way that works is because it makes sense. If it's a maybe dressed up as a no, then you're going to flush it out at this point, because if they are just wanting to speak to the CFO, they're probably going to be his questions, in which case it does make sense to book a follow-up to answer those. And you've still controlled the sales process without pushing a prospect through it. But if there are genuine objections, then this is a point where it flushes them out. Remember, it doesn't matter if there are objections. Prospects will hide objections from you, but it's making sure that you're giving temperature checks if they're not willing to schedule a next step, which makes sense. Given what they've said and what they've agreed to at the front call, there's going to be something lurking underneath. So we're not trying to force a prospect through that doesn't want to be forced. What we're trying to do is to guide a prospect through, make sure that we maintain momentum with genuine prospects, and flush out genuine concerns, objections, or lack of priorities from prospects that perhaps don't want to give us bad news. Edge case 2, I need to think about it. Need time to think. Classic, which just means I'm not really sure and I don't really know whether you can help me. And again, we want to push these prospects, and it will feel uncomfortable at first. They've agreed to give you a yes or a no. Now, we agreed it's fine to say no if it's not a good fit or not a priority at this moment. Is that what's happening here, or have I missed another concern? And the reason this is so powerful is you're saying, look, we said at the beginning of the call that if it's not a good fit or a priority, you would let us know. And if not, we would discuss it. So is this what's happening here, or have I missed another concern? So it's very difficult for the prospect then to wriggle out of that. Remember, I need to think about it is probably a no or an uncertainty. So we either want to get that uncertainty or that concern out, or we want to find out what it is or get that no. A no is absolutely fine, but we don't want to end this call without understanding where the prospect is. If they don't answer, or again, they still try and wriggle, because prospects are wriggly little things sometimes. So if they don't say that, then just politely push again. And a really good question that I like asking is, okay, well, aside from that, let me know if there was a reason that you didn't do this, what would that be? So a hypothetical question is a really good way of taking the pressure off, but actually getting the right answer. So, okay, well, if you didn't do this, what would the reason be? And it's a really good way of getting the right answer, because you're taking the pressure off. They'll feel then that they need to give you an answer, and you'll probably get something like, oh, well, at the moment, we've got to be careful with cash flow or revenue or something along those lines. But at least you'll get out the real objection, so you can start to discuss that from a point of truth. And edge case 3, so CFO might join the demo out of nowhere at the beginning of the call. If you get new stakeholders, never assume that the pain points that have been discussed before are the same as that stakeholder. What you don't want to do is speak at someone given a point of view of another stakeholder. So if you get a new stakeholder on the call, invite them into the conversation, recap where they are, but acknowledge that they might have a different opinion. Great to have you on board. Look, last time we covered this, we've set the demo up because, as we understand it, the main priority or the challenges that you're experiencing at the moment were around X, Y, and Z. That being said, I'm conscious that I've just at the moment got a revenue, a CRO or a sales view on this, and I'm conscious that you'll probably have a view. How does that align with your priorities and your view of things at XYZ company at the moment? And what it will do is it will allow you to assess whether they get a different view and ask them what they would like to see over the course of that conversation. Part of the reason stakeholders stakeholders will block if they feel like you're talking at them or their views aren't being registered. So invite them into that conversation so you can address that head on. And again, you'll get this where you tried everything and they still won't book, or they're trying to wriggle. They are little wrigglers. And just call it out in a really polite way. They've agreed to give you a yes or a no, or like just at the beginning of the call. We didn't discuss maybe. So politely say, look, I'll be upfront. I'm sensing a little bit of conversation. So it either means I've missed something important, or it isn't a priority, which is absolutely fine, or there's a concern we haven't mentioned yet, or you feel a bit sure. Which of those is it? And again, we're putting it onto the prospect, but making it easy for them to say no, but similarly hard to kind of rig out without giving us the true answer to why they won't commit. And that's it. So to summarize, opening bookend is the upfront contract. So state the purpose of the call, explain what happens and what the prospect is going to get, state what you need to be able to get them there, define what yes or no looks like, and then get agreement so the consistency principle is on your side. And then the closing bookend at the end is summarize what you've covered, flush out any objections or temperature check where the prospect is, call back the contract, and then book the next step if appropriate. And that's it. So your action plan, next 5 calls, practice the opening bookend. The first part of any sales interaction is one where it's the same every time. So you can practice to make sure that you come across in the same way with a strong sense of conviction and authority about what's going to happen on the call. Get comfortable with the upfront contract and get comfortable with the talk track at the beginning of the call. So practice that and practice that on your next call. Make sure that you're using the closing bookend as well. So practice like booking a meeting from a meeting. Like make sure you're booking a meeting from the meeting. Say, given what we've talked about, would you have any objection in getting this? It's easy to do. It's just getting into the habit so that it feels comfortable. And then making sure that you just practice this. And that's it. So all you need to do, practice the opening, practice the closing, and then making sure that you're geared up. So you're using the bookends to keep control of the sales process. It'll feel massively different because you'll feel in control. And remember, if you're getting value from this, then if you want to get us to look at your whole sales and marketing process, diagnose every bottleneck and tell you exactly what to do to fix it, you can do that for a quid. The link is in the description. Just click the link, book a call, and I'll speak to you then. And subscribe for more of this. So any questions, let me know. Other than that, I will see you in the next video.